and welcome to Grove Bites. I'm Alex Guest. My guests today are Liz Hoare and Nick Helm, authors of the Grove book, Seeking Spiritual Direction. This book provides helpful advice around the need for and process of finding a suitable spiritual director, as well as key theological frameworks to help understand the purposes of spiritual direction. So, hi, Liz and Nick. It's great to see you. One of the first questions I'd really like to ask is what made you feel that this was a necessary book to write? How to find or go about finding your spiritual director?
Well, okay, I'll go first. I think it's such an essential gift for the church, and in a world where lots of people are losing connection with the church, they're still interested in exploring spirituality. And so to me, it's a bridge for people who are spiritual but not religious, to use the famous phrase. And it's a conversation as well. So it's based on a relationship, and countless people are looking for spiritual directors. And countless people are wondering what it is. It's a bit mysterious still. So it's not an evangelical thing to do. And most people who read Grove booklets are evangelicals. So what is this thing that some people seem to rave about?
I mean, I think the other area of people that we were keen to communicate with was those who are told, for instance, going through some sort of vocational exploration process within the church, a spiritual director would be a good thing. And in my experience, having spoken to many people who've been told that and trying to help them find a spiritual director, many have no real idea of what a spiritual director might be and why it would be a good thing, and kind of need some help to find out a bit more. So we kind of felt there was a gap in the market in helping people understand what spiritual direction is and kind of what it isn't, because you know, the title spiritual director can conjure up all sorts of images that are a long way away from what the reality is. I mean, just the word director is a bit of a problem, I think, because the last thing most spiritual directors would do is actually direct you. It's much more about seeking the Spirit's directing. Where is the Spirit leading us is a key question in the process, I think.
That's a really helpful distinction. And you also talk about avoiding comparing it to Christian counselling and the like, because it does stand in its own right. Christian counselling is very different to spiritual direction. Liz, you just described it also as a conversation. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who that conversation is between?
Yeah, so it's two people meeting together, and I guess the person seeking spiritual direction is the one who does most of the talking. But there's also a third person in the room. And as Nick says, it's really the Holy Spirit who is the director. So those two people, as well as talking to each other, as I'm talking to you now, they are, both of them, listening to the third person in the room primarily. What's the Spirit saying in this situation? So there is a conversation going on, and Nick has a very nice diagram that kind of crystallizes this. So I'll let Nick explain, because it's his diagram.
It's not really my diagram, but I use it a lot. So it comes from a pair of authors in America who wrote about spiritual direction 20, 30 years ago, called Barry and Connolly. And it's a triangle, basically, as Liz has been saying, three people in the room, effectively. So the spiritual director, the spiritual directee, and God, each corner of the triangle. And while if you think of the director and the directee as the two corners that are on the base of the triangle, that's where the presence physically is to each other. That's the relationship. But the whole point of this relationship is about the relationship, particularly of the directee to God, which is the other side of the triangle. And that's where the focus of the spiritual director is, not so much on the directee in themselves, but on the directee in their relationship with God. So it's the dynamic of that side of the triangle that is the real focus of spiritual direction. And of course, the spiritual director can't do that unless they have a relationship with God. So their interaction with God in their history, but also in the moment, is an important part of the dynamic of it all too, to help them keep their focus and to help them be alert to where the promptings of the Spirit might be in what's being shared, what's being explored.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So it's important for spiritual directors to maintain their spiritual relationship with God. And one of the risks, if they are not, is that you end up with a bad spiritual director. So what are some of the warning signs of poor spiritual direction?
I think one of the signs is where you have a sense that the focus is not on what's going on between you and God. So sometimes that might be that the director is actually kind of asking the directee for some form of affirmation or some attention to what they're about, that is a kind of distraction from your agenda as a directee. So that sense of the spiritual director actually getting in the way or distracting you is something that can happen. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. But I as a spiritual director can find it quite hard at times to hold myself back when I feel I've got something really important from my experience that should be speaking to this. But what is more important is that the directee finds where God is for them in their experience, which is a completely different life to mine.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think just going back to the conversation image, we all know what it's like when the person we're talking to isn't listening, and a spiritual director who is just not listening to what's being said, either because they can't hear God because they've got their own issues, or because they immediately relate it to themselves, and so they're thinking about their own story instead of paying attention. And then I think when the agenda shifts and it's no longer on what is God saying to you, the person seeking direction in this situation, it's lost. So that would be a bad example of direction.
My final question would be, what advice would you give somebody who is thinking possibly they need some spiritual direction, is perhaps a little bit nervous or shy or reluctant? What advice do you have for that type of person?
I think just asking why has spiritual direction suddenly come onto my radar? Have I overheard somebody talking about it? Or is it just a desire for something more? I remember for me personally, I prayed, but I knew there was more to it. And I wasn't going to find it by just muddling around on my own. I needed someone to walk with me for a way and talk to me about prayer, and listen to what I was struggling with in prayer. So if you're that kind of person, you want to grow in prayer and you're just not sure how, then a spiritual director might be just the right sort of person for you.
Yes, I'd echo that sense of starting from your own need and your own desire, what you are looking for. And I think one of the things that I found really helpful in thinking about the place of spiritual direction in my life is is the analogy of a house. And in a house, we have different rooms set aside for different types of activity or lack of activity. So it is with our lives that we need some sort of structure often to give us the space to do particular things. And spiritual direction is an extraordinary gift of a space for us to pay attention with far less distractions than in other rooms in our lives, because the conditions in that room are set up to help us do that. And so to kind of think about the quality of the room that you're looking for in your life, to attend to your spirituality, to attend to your relationship with God, I think can be a really helpful one in kind of getting the motivation to go for it, which is the last bit of advice I'd give anyone, is go for it. And you can always walk away if it's the wrong person or it's the wrong time of life for you. There is no obligation to hang in there for the sake of keeping someone else happy. It's your happiness with God that's the most important thing.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you both for a little snapshot into your growth book. And it is a really useful tool. It provides a lot of questions for the reader to think about, helpful analogies, and even a nice appendix with some go-to people and some resources. So thank you very much. It's a very valuable growth book. And I look forward to reading other works of yours. Thank you very much. To get a copy of this book, go to the Grove Book website, where you can order Seeking Spiritual Direction as a print copy with free postage or as a PDF. There are many more great Grove books applying the Bible to a wide variety of situations. They're written by authors who know what they are writing about. Grove books are bite-sized publications that you can really get your teeth into. Goodbye for now. Hope to see you again soon.